air quality will probably go downhill. Climate change will be accelerated. Kenneth Davis, Professor of Atmospheric and Climate Science at Penn State University. The Environmental Protection Agency decided that the Endangerment Finding from 2009, which held that greenhouse gases were hazardous to human health and the environment, that actually that was wrong, and that they argued that greenhouse gases are not a hazard to human health and the environment. The decision to drop the endangerment finding has no basis in scientific evidence. The scientific evidence for greenhouse gases harming human health and the environment is, if anything, is much stronger today than it was in 2009. Basic connection between greenhouse gases and human health comes through the greenhouse gases' impact on the radiative balance of the planet. Greenhouse gases cause climate warming by trapping infrared radiation, which the Earth would emit to space to cool and come into balance with sunlight. Greenhouse gases trap that infrared radiation more, and therefore the surface has to warm up in order to reach radiative balance. The degree of climate change has become more and more severe and significant. If you, for example, look at the last 10 years and ask how do these rank in terms of the warmest years on the planet, mostly the last 10 years are the 10 warmest years on the planet. And this has been true for the last roughly 20 years. So there's really no question that climate is changing and that greenhouse gases are responsible. The additional evidence we've sadly been gathering are events like Hurricane Helene in North Carolina, where severe flooding, losses of homes, losses of lives, wildfires in California, Altadena, Pasadena, Camp Fire in Paradise. Events like this can happen, of course, with or without climate change, but the frequency and severity of these events is increasing in a way that we could not reasonably explain just as natural. So the endangerment finding from 2009 was quite important in that the EPA made the decision that they should regulate greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases, if you breathe them in, they're not harmful. You know, we exhale and inhale CO2 all the time. Obviously at very high concentrations, that's another story, but in the atmosphere, that's not what we're talking about. And so you could say it's an indirect effect. These gases change the climate change harms humans. And so the EPA, having been told by the court that yes, these gases count under the Clean Air Act, then answered the question, is there really evidence that this is harming human health? And they decided yes. Therefore, the EPA was empowered to regulate greenhouse gases. Without the endangerment finding and without EPA regulations on, for example, fuel efficiency standards, which are, I would argue, the most important that have existed in the US, potentially we have vehicles that are less fuel efficient, emit more of the traditional pollutants, particulate matter, carbon monoxide, hydrocarbons into the atmosphere that could degrade air quality, the kind of classic air quality problems. And of course, they will potentially emit more greenhouse gases, accelerating climate change. This will surely be challenged in court. So what happens in the meantime, I don't know, and I think that's also a problem for the industries because one thing I've at least heard in the literature, in the news, is that stability is important. You need to know what to plan for to run a business. And if, in fact, the courts are taking months, which would not be unusual, to decide are there regulations or no regulations or something in between, that's a hard planning environment.